Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a gray overcast May day in 2025. We're just about halfway through the month, a little beyond. Earlier in the week, I was contacted by an acquaintance of mine. He runs a auto dismantling yard further up north in Maine. Believe it or not, there's people above me. People think I'm a long ways up. And he had 4 Turbo 400s and a Power Glide that he wanted to move along, and he was headed down my way. Turns out it was today, this afternoon. I was a little concerned that 2 of them, this one and one of the other Turbo 400s, had some rust on the input and output shaft. I'm very nervous about how people store their cores. If you leave them outside, they're probably junk. The other ones looked okay, so I was willing to chance it. He's a wicked nice guy. I expressed my concern just in the few texts we had back and forth. I probably, even if they were all junk, wouldn't ask. When I make a deal, I make a deal. I went ahead and bought all of them, and whatever's left, I own. So I was curious about this one. The other ones are fine rebuildable cores, I'm sure, but this, if you know what you're looking at or you read the thumbnail, is a clutch turbo. Well, let's go over the basic concept. It's the late 60s, early 70s. Torque converter technology is pretty much non-existent. I know Chrysler had some factory high stall converters. They probably just took a 6-cylinder converter and threw it behind a 440. I don't know the deal, but they were onto something. But converter technology like we have today did not exist. And, you know, the manual transmission ruled everything. It was the fastest way to get from A to B. Some will argue it still is, but anyway, somebody dreamed this idea up. We'll take a scatter shield, the same one you got your 4-speed bolted to, and we'll bolt it to this adapter. They did this to both a Chrysler or Mopar 727 transmission and the Turbo 400. I'd take the 400 all day long, but in both applications, you're putting a lot of stress on parts that were probably never designed not to have the big hydraulic cushion of the torque converter in between. So you bolt the scatter shield on, you have this 3-ring pump driving arrangement that actually rides between the fingers on a 3-finger clutch. So you can't run a diaphragm clutch with one of these. You have to have either a Borg and Beck or maybe a long style, but judging by the width, probably the Borg and Beck would be the best case scenario. There's no cushion, because once again, the torque converter is gone. When this thing shifts, it is direct. There's no hydraulic cushion whatsoever. This particular one, the cooler circuit's been blocked off, and obviously internally they're oiling, lubricating the parts. First instinct, when I look at it, like, well, I need to make the cooler active again, because if I was to put this in a hot rod, which is all I would ever consider, I would want the cooling, right? But then again, stop to think about it. Are you making as much heat? You don't have the torque converter. That's where your heat comes from. The rest is a pump and a sump, and probably no different than your hydrostatic transmission in your lawnmower. If you had enough oil capacity and you had a temp probe in the pan to see where it was at, I'd be willing to try it first, maybe. We'll get to that someday, because I'm actually going to, I'm going to rip into this thing and refurbish it, make something out of it. So whether it's a good use of my time, hey, whatever, I'm a archaeologist. So if you follow the channel, you know my first 2 jobs were working in transmission shops. And back in the early 80s at this point, there wasn't a whole lot of performance transmission parts, but there was some. You had Turbo Action, Fairbanks, B&M, etc. B&M's been around since the 60s. So we had catalogs at the transmission shops, and one of my favorite was Fairbanks, because I believe they were in Connecticut. So being in the Northeast, they were probably pretty popular. Might have even sent salesmen up, who knows. But we had Fairbanks catalogs, and I used to study that like a book. I used to order catalogs of all speed parts and just study them, read them cover to cover. Long before the internet, young kids watching won't understand what that's like. To look forward to getting a book or a magazine in the mail and reading that thing cover to cover. So in the Fairbanks catalog, I always like their paint jobs, and that's going to kind of, let's just sidebar on that for a minute. If you remember, again, if you've been watching this channel for a while, I built a lime green yellow colored Turbo 400. I put the stripes on it. I had a bat on it. It wasn't an exact Fairbanks copy because they had more yellow. And the reason why I painted it like that is because I had stripped the transmission and it had a Fairbanks aluminum reverse manual valve body. I remember having one of those back in the day, and I wasn't smart enough to make it work. We stuck it in my buddy's Camaro one afternoon, but you have to do internal modifications. We're in high school, we didn't know any better. So that was not successful. I wanted to be successful and make one of those work. So I saved the valve body, and one day I had that other yellow transmission going back together and decided that I should try it. So I asked one question on the first, when I joined the DIY Turbo 400 Facebook page on Facebook, I asked a question about the valve body. I forget what the question was. It was answered. I put it together and never got to experience if it worked or not because I sold it to a buddy of mine or traded it or whatever we did. He put it as Model A. And I drove it last fall. That's where the 496 came from. The 496 lived in front of that transmission. He said it worked great, but I only went up and down the street and I could feel it shift. But yesterday, I went up to help him with the Model A, adjust the valves on his new 496 that has a 871 blower on it. And he wanted me to drive it again. And this time we went a little further and I got to experience my transmission. And man, that thing is firm. I thoroughly enjoyed that part of it, and the throttle response with that blown 496 was pretty cool too. Anyway, in the Fairbanks catalog was, of course, a version of this. Now, I don't know if this is B&M, Fairbanks. I think Winters might have made some parts for these too. Not a whole lot of people did, but they did this modification to both the 727 Torque Flight and the Turbo 400. I'm glad this is a Turbo 400. And while I worked at the second transmission shop, I actually borrowed one of these and I had to do something to it. I had it half apart, put it back together, put it in my Chevelle. I already had a 4-speed in it. So I already had a 3-finger clutch because this is what drives this pump drive. This rides between the fingers on a 3-finger style clutch to drive the whole time the engine's running, the pressure plate's turning. So the pump is always going. And it had the scatter shield on it. You have to run these bolts backwards through the holes. I think they clear without modifying the bell housing, but remains to be seen. And I tried it, but it was another issue with the valve body. I couldn't hardly feel second gear, I think, and the engine in my Chevelle had a little issue with the valve train that night. It was the end of the year and I never tried it again. But I do remember that I had to buy the large 18 spline Mopar clutch disc. So I took my 4-speed out, which was 26 spline, 1/8" 26 spline GM. And I had to buy a Mopar clutch disc, which I think is still here somewhere. And everything else is pretty much a bolt-in. You know, I probably had a different drive shaft because I moved the crossmember in a Chevelle. That wasn't a big deal. The conversion only took a few hours and it worked, kind of. I wish I could have tried it more. Now here we are, many, many years in the future, and we're going to get a chance to try it again. Now, is it a good use of my time? Well, curiosity has got me. So we're right in the beginning stages of discovering exactly what this is. Obviously, it's a clutch turbo. I don't remember the Fairbanks having a snap ring on the pump drive here. This one does, so maybe it is a B&M or somebody else's. Unfortunately, in my mind anyway, it's 1-inch 23 spline input shaft. That's Mopar and Ford. Small. That's pretty small I was hoping when I saw the picture, it was at least 1'8" 26 spline like a GM, or larger, but I could tell by the size it wasn't really big. The length is stock GM. The bearing retainer fits a 1957 or 8 and up 3-speed Saginaw, so you know that at least it's the right size. The bolt pattern appears to be typical GM 4-speed, so adaptation shouldn't be that hard. With no cushion of the torque converter, these things are really mean, even at pot throttle shifting. Wide open throttle, whatever, you're probably fine. It gets meaner, but everything's happening faster. Just putting around town, you might even want to push the clutch in to shift it. I read some people do this. There's very little information out there about these, but again, the beginning stages of relearning what I thought I knew or never knew. The cooler circuit is blocked off, and first instinct to say, well, I need to make that active again. Obviously, they've done internal modifications and they're lubing the transmission, which would be the return oil from the cooler would typically lube the transmission. We need to do something about that. Something's obviously been done here, so we can't just put cooler lines on it, probably without doing a little research as to how they rerouted everything, but that's going to go with everything inside. It's going to be very interesting, I'm sure. But then again, do I need the cooler? Because the torque converter is where the heat comes from. The converter itself, is it any different than your lawnmower? Your hydrostatic transmission in your lawnmower? I mean, you got a pump, returning back to sump all the time, most of the time, operating a few clutch packs. If you have enough fluid capacity and it had a temp gauge, it wouldn't take long to figure out what's going on. Maybe you wouldn't need one. If you did, then you'd have to go to plan B. Either reactivate the cooler circuit, put one of those big air-cooled pans on it, maybe circulate the oil in the pan using an external pump through a cooler. That's not a bad idea either. I would never dream of racing with one of these, but it might be cool in some old hot rod or something. I have plenty of scatter shields. I mean, my investment's going to be pretty low. Going to be interesting anyway. Again, I have so many other projects going on. I'm not going to get too excited about it, but it came in the deal. The case is probably usable, but it is been dropped or something right there. Out of sight that direction. I have another case I'm looking at. I've been saving for something. It's even the gray color. Probably a perfect replacement for this. I mean, this case would clean right up, but I can't tell if this is an actual crack right there. It might have got dropped even. It's a shame because whoever cut it back then did a really nice job. It's obviously an 8-bolt case because this takes all 8 bolts going through to hold this adapter ring on, which is actually really thick. Be curious to see what it's made out of. Hopefully aluminum, so it's not too heavy. Pretty simple rig. I mean, literally, you're driving the pump, you're gonna hook your shifter up, you have to push the clutch in just like it's considered a manual transmission, but it's hydraulic. So everything you do with a standard transmission, start and stop at a stoplight, again, you could push it in to shift it if you wanted to lessen the shock load. I remember reading, I think, an article in Hot Rod Magazine when they these had a small heyday in the Pro Street era. I like to find the article, I believe it was called Poor Man's Lenco, which is kind of funny, but it is. Because it's clutchless, obviously. I mean, you could just whale through the gears. Given the right combination of parts and tires, again, I would want a bigger input shaft. I don't know what the shock load was going to do to the rest of it. I'm pretty sure in that article, the guy was running 9s in like an El Camino with like a 1432 rear slick. So they can take some abuse. I mean, you're not going to put this in a modern day 3-second 1/8 mile car, but you could probably have some fun with it. And we're going to have some fun with it anyway. Right here, we're going to tear it apart sooner than later. Just curious what's in there and discover. We're going to do some research tonight in the comfort of my recliner to see what information's out there. You got to filter all that as well, but I like to look at pictures of stuff and try to compare. If somebody thinks they have a B&M and it looks like mine, well, I'll probably make that jump too. I know Jake's Performance was talking about making some of the parts too, so we'll see. So that's my story today. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in a couple days.